Hey guys, how is everybody doing? And welcome to the Christopher Nolan ranking. So, if you have been following my channel for the last couple of weeks, which almost a month now actually, I have been going through all of Christopher Nolan's filmography and reviewing all of his films leading up to his brand new film, The Odyssey, which is now officially playing in theaters. And hoo-wee, it's been breaking some box office numbers, which I'm very happy to see. I have finally was able to watch it. I've been very busy. I've also had a lot of personal stuff going on to where it's kind of been getting in the way, but thankfully, a lot of stuff is getting sorted out. So I finally was able to watch it Monday, and man, oh man, I got some thoughts for it when I get to it. So, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be ranking all 13 of his films from worst to best. Now, when I say worst, a lot like a lot of videos when I do rankings, I don't think Christopher Nolan has made a bad movie. Now, I do think there are some movies that he's made that are just okay or maybe bland or whatever. Now, that's kind of like the first five of his films, I would say. So, like the first five films I'm going to be talking about, I would say, are like bland to just okay films. But after that, he's made terrific films to nearly masterpieces in my mind. Excuse me. So, I do not think that he's made a bad movie, so let's get that out of the way. And also, should always go without saying, this is my own personal ranking. These are how I feel about these movies. This is my own personal opinion, and just because I put one movie above the other, or maybe I put a movie too low, maybe your favorite is actually my least favorite, or whatever. How about instead of yelling at me, you just give me your ranking down in the comments below and we'll talk about it, okay? So we don't have to yell at me. So I will have a couple hot takes in this video. I'm gonna warn you now. So, with that all out of the way, here's my own personal ranking of all 13 Christopher Nolan movies as of 2026. Also, a little bit of fair warning. Sorry if my voice sounds a bit scratchy or low today. I just went to a concert last night, so I was screaming my voice out. It's it's just fucking gone at this point. So, a little bit of fair warning before I begin. Coming in at number 13, my least favorite Christopher Nolan movie is Dunkirk. This is a movie that tells the story of World War II, which obviously, if pure its title, and if you know what Dunkirk is, you would already know that. And what this movie is real, all this movie really is, and what this movie is really trying to do, it's making you try to feel like you are in the war and that you are in World War II. And I will give Christopher Nolan credit. He does a great job at doing that at times, and I do feel like it does kind of lose that realistic feeling because this movie's only PG-13, which I had a huge issue with. So it kind of loses a little bit of that realistic feel because of that. But since it's Christopher Nolan, he will do his best with what he's got, and he does make you feel like you are in the war at times because it does like this really cool anthology thing where we follow different characters and different sections of this movie with either at sea, the sky, or the land, where we follow different characters at different points of war or different locations of war. So you kind of get the feeling what it was like to be at war in those certain locations. And I think this movie does a very, very good job at that. And like I said, Christopher Nolan does a very good job with it. However, that is the only focus of the film, and that's all the movie focuses on. And you don't have any likable characters, you don't have any story growth at all. And the writing, I would say this is Christopher Nolan's weakest written film that he's ever made, in my mind. So when you have no characters, no story arc, nothing like that, and you're just trying to make me feel like I'm at war, that doesn't necessarily appeal to me because you can make me feel like I'm at war with interesting characters. Not to compare this movie to other war movies, but my absolute favorite war movie and one of my all-time favorite films of all time is Saving Private Ryan. And that movie does a terrific job of making you feel like you're in the war and during this battle while still having you root for the characters and having you go along the journey with those characters. And for him to only really focus on the war part of this movie, that doesn't appeal to me, and that just takes away my enjoyment. Now, there's probably a lot of people out there that probably really enjoy this movie because of that, but I'm not one of them. This movie does not gravitate towards me just simply because it's trying to put me at war. When Christopher Nolan has had amazing characters, amazing stories, amazing arcs, or whatever, and for this movie not have that, I never see myself rewatching it again. Coming in at number 12 is going to be Tenet. Now, I will be fully honest. I do not hate this movie. I do not, think that it's a bad movie necessarily. I actually enjoy Tenet. The only reason it's this low is because it is one of the most confusing and most conflicting films that I have ever seen because I just don't know what the hell is going on throughout this whole movie. And I have been seeing a lot of people on the internet, mainly Twitter, that, love this movie, praise this movie, and I'm happy to see people praise it. And people are like, "Oh, this movie's ahead of its time," and I guarantee you people will see it one day of what I see. Well, that might not be for another 4 years for me or something like that because as of right now, as of watching this movie today, I don't see the movie that some people saw. Now, there's probably a lot of people out there that really do understand this movie and fully understand what's going on. But for me, as I'm watching it, I just don't know what's going on. However, even with the confusion out of the way, it's still a fun movie. It's still a fun, like, spy action movie that I can put on and, just enjoy it for that. But however, even because of that, the story, the villain, the mission itself, it's all generic stuff that I've already seen before. Especially since last month I just watched the Sean Connery James Bond movies for the first time. So when you just watch those and then you put on Tenet, you already see the similarities and differences to where it's just like, oh, I've seen this already. But the action and editing and the concept of this movie is very good about the movie. I really think this concept is really cool, and of things being told backwards and the editing during it. I think that's probably the best thing about this movie is its editing because the action sequences when things are being told backwards, like the scene where the main character is just like, "Oh, what happened here?" And he goes, "Hasn't happened yet," and that's a really cool sequence. I really think that's really cool. The editing is probably the best part about this movie, if I'm being completely honest, and even the action during the action during this movie is really enjoyable, and it does show that Christopher Nolan can, make entertaining action sequences. However, even with all that fun in the way, I still don't know what the fuck is going on. Coming in at number 11 is going to be his debut film, Following. Now, this is a movie where it's pretty much a student film. That's what this movie is, and I honestly really enjoy it because of it. A lot of people would have this movie, lower, probably at the bottom, just because it's his debut film. It's very weaker compared to these big scale films that he's made now. But honestly, I would much rather watch this 80-minute movie of this, Fight Club kind of knockoff film over the other two movies I already talked about. It's a fun movie, honestly. Now, the movie's only 80 minutes long, so it doesn't take up too much of your time, and it's honestly kind of shocking to see Christopher Nolan make an 80-minute movie when he goes on to make 3 to 2.5 hour long movies. So, it's kind of a good breather, I guess I could say. So if you, so you know, starting off this review series with this film, it was actually kind of a fun idea because starting off where he began and where he is now, it's always kind of cool because I went from an 80-minute movie to a 3 hour movie. That was a lot of fun. But Following is honestly just a movie I really enjoyed. Now it's pretty much just Fight Club in a way with the two characters, and the way this movie's told out of place, kind of like Memento, which this movie's basically a pre-Memento. This was him kind of showing off what he could do with that kind of story and that kind of concept, which he would go on to do a much better version of that later on in his career. So, I can't really talk about it too much because it is pretty much a student film. So that's all it really is. This is his debut film, and it's pretty much a student film, and it's a pretty fun movie, honestly. Coming in at number 10 is going to be Insomnia. Now, honestly, I do think that this movie is pretty underrated for Christopher Nolan's filmography because I don't really see a lot of people talk about this movie. And I honestly feel like it has to do with the fact that maybe this is the only film that he has not written in his entire career. So, because he's written every single movie that he's made, this was the only one that he didn't write. I don't remember who the writer was, but this is a remake from a film from like 1980 something, I think, or maybe it was even in the 90s. I could be wrong. But this is a remake of an 80s film, so I think that might have been a reason why he didn't write it. And it is kind of weird to see Christopher Nolan do a remake because he's an original guy. So to see him do a remake is also kind of cool. But however, this is a movie I do really enjoy. The only thing that kind of holds it back for me is that there's no characters to really root for. The cast is awesome. Al Pacino, Robin Williams, and excuse me, whoever the other chick was, I forget her name, but she's good in the movie. You know, you have a really good cast, especially Robin Williams, which rest in peace. I really wish he was still alive. The other day was his birthday too. Oh God. But the cast in this movie is very, very good. You have stars in your movie, like Oscar winners, I guess I could say. But even with that, I don't really like these characters. There's no one to really root for because Al Pacino's character, the movie hints at that he's probably a dirty cop and that he's done some pretty stupid shit or wild shit to get what he wants. And the movie kind of hints that Robin Williams might have touched that girl, which the movie pretty much says like, "Oh, I didn't," but it still hints at that. And I want to root for Robin Williams, but I can't really root for a guy that might have diddled a little girl. So yeah, that's kind of hard to root for. But this story is a pretty cool concept, and I do think the insomnia of this movie, which pure to its title, Insomnia, I do think that Christopher Nolan does an amazing job of making you feel the Al Pacino's insomnia and his lack of sleep, and with the editing, especially with like certain random images or whatever, or maybe he sees someone that he thinks is dead or whatever. This movie does a very good job of putting you in his shoes and making you feel the insomnia. And the the whole journey that you go on with Al Pacino as well, it's a very interesting ride because since the story is about how he accidentally shot and killed his partner, and so he has to cover that up. But Robin Williams' character, who he's after, saw it, and so they have this back and forth exchange of like, oh, if you try and turn me in, I could tell people what you did or whatever. So I really enjoyed this movie because of that, but because of its characters and hard to root for any of them, I don't ever see myself like really enjoying the movie. My fucking nose is itchy. Coming in at number 9 is going to be the first film of the Dark Knight trilogy with Batman Begins. I really enjoy Batman Begins, and when growing up, this was one of my favorite Batman movies. And and even to this day, it might be this low, but it's still a damn good movie, and I do think it's a damn good origin story, especially compared to a lot of other origin stories like that, especially that we're getting now and kind of early on in the comic book genre. This is still one of the best origin stories of a comic book movie. And you also have to give this movie credit and love because this basically kind of revived Batman after George Clooney and Bat Nipples.
Bat nipples? Okay, Joel Schumacher, what the fuck? It's bat nipples, bat crotch shots, and bat asses! This is completely unacceptable and
So this was the pretty much the revival of Batman and how we know Batman today. I don't think we would have gotten the Batman or Batfleck or any other live action Batman movie if it wasn't for Batman Begins. Christopher Nolan helped revive the comic book genre and helped revive this character after Bat Nipples. So I have to give credit and love to this movie because of that. However, as time goes on, this movie seems very tame. Not only does it, kind of feel bland compared to its sequels and its follow up, but especially with Batman's coming out with Batfleck. I really enjoy Batfleck, if I'm completely honest. And that whole warehouse fight sequence of Batman versus Superman makes every fight sequence in this whole trilogy look tame. And even The Batman, which is, a first of a hopeful trilogy that we'll get, which we'll see if the Batman Part 2 ever even fucking comes out because it got delayed again. Which the Batman coming out, that movie makes this movie look tame. And again, just compared to its sequels, it's a tame Batman movie. Not only but that still does not take away my enjoyment of the movie. I still really enjoy it, and especially with Christopher Nolan's filmography, which I'll get to the films above it, this is just another kind of like a low point of his career, in my opinion. This is still when he was still becoming the Christopher Nolan because this was only like his fourth film at the time. This one came out right after Insomnia. This was one of those movies that put him on the map as, oh, this is the guy. However, again, as time goes on, it just seems tame. But this was the introduction of the Dark Knight trilogy. So this introduced us to Christian Bale as Batman, Michael Caine as Alfred, and Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow, and all of these amazing actors in this trilogy. This was the start of it. It introduced us to these characters and the cast members of this trilogy. And Christian Bale is my Batman. He will always be my Batman. And this was the introduction to him. And it's a damn good start to an amazing trilogy, but as time goes on, it just gets tamer. Coming in at number 8 is probably his most emotional movie in his entire career and his entire filmography, Interstellar. Interstellar was a movie when I first watched it. I liked it, but I didn't necessarily love it because I always thought the ending of the movie of, Coop being Murph's ghost or whatever, I never really knew how to feel about that at the time. But then when I rewatched it the second time, expecting it and, understanding it more, that's something that I really enjoyed this time. But Interstellar is just an awesome film, and it is one of the most emotional films that I have ever seen. I guarantee you, if you have a son, a daughter, or whatever, if you have some sort of kid and you watch this movie, you will break down into tears. I'm still trying to convince my dad to watch this just so he can tell me that he cried. Because I have recommended this movie to a lot of people who have not seen it, and they have all told me that they cried watching it. And it's going to be hard not to find someone that doesn't cry watching Interstellar. But this is just an awesome movie. Not only is it just an emotional film about fatherhood and appreciating your loved ones and time or whatever, but it's also just an awesome space movie because not only does the journey of this film like go on like some wild directions and just a wild journey, the visual effects of space and the journey that they go on is just some of the fucking prettiest shit that I have ever seen in my entire life. Like I'm pretty sure this movie won best visual effects at the Oscars, which fucking deservingly so. And I still think that it is an absolute fucking crime that Matthew McConaughey never won an Oscar for this movie. Because to me, this is the best performance that he has ever given in his life. And it's kind of it's a shame that we haven't seen Matthew McConaughey in any other Christopher Nolan movie outside of this one, which at the same time is probably a good thing because how the fuck are you going to top this performance if you ask me? But whatever. But this is just an awesome movie. I really enjoy this movie. It's one of the most emotional films that I've ever seen. But where the movie kind of loses me a little bit is all the Matt Damon stuff.
Matt Damon!
So, Matt Damon in this movie, I feel like was just an added thing randomly. It kind of felt like that. Christopher Nolan wanted Matt Damon in this movie, but didn't know how to who to cast him as, so he just wrote a whole different subplot and character just to have Matt Damon in his movie. So that whole thing going on in this movie, it really takes me out, and it also just seems really fucking random too. It's just like, well, if you took all of this out, it would change nothing from the story. This movie is nearly 3 hours long. You cut out all of Matt Damon's shit, this movie would be 2.5 hours. Alright. Time to bite the bullet. Coming in at number 7 is going to be The Dark Knight. Okay, just because I have this movie at number 7 does not mean that I hate the movie. Does not mean that I think it's not the best comic book movie of all time. Oh, it's the worst movie ever. No. Just because it's at my number 7 does not mean I don't like the movie. This was one of my favorite films growing up. However, as time goes on, I think the internet praises this fucking thing like they've never watched a movie before or a comic book film before. There are tons of better comic book movies out there in my mind. Like, to me, this is the best made comic book movie. To me, in quality wise, writing wise, directing wise, performance wise, this is easily the best comic book movie out there. However, it's afraid to be a comic book movie at the same time. But The Dark Knight is an amazing film. This is a genre changing movie as is. This is one of the best comic book movies you will probably ever watch. It is one of my favorites. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. This is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. And this is the movie that put Christopher Nolan on the map. The moment this movie came out, the comic book genre was never the same. Whether it was, directing wise or performance wise, you would never see a comic book film the same ever again after this movie. And a large part of that is not only Christopher Nolan's directing and writing, it was Heath Ledger's brilliant and genre changing performance as the Joker. Heath Ledger as the Joker is what this movie is. Every time people talk about this movie, they instantly bring up Heath Ledger's Joker. And for good reason. He is an amazing Joker, and he's an amazing villain. And hell, he's the best comic book movie villain that we will ever have. There's no one that will ever top this. There have people that have, you know, maybe come close, but even then, they have still not come close. Joaquin Phoenix won Best Actor for playing the Joker. I don't even think he touched Heath Ledger's level, even winning an Oscar. But this is just an awesome film. However, I do think it's a little bit overrated because of fucks like people on the internet. Because they praise this thing like it's baby Jesus, and they praise it like it's better than fucking Jesus. Hell, there's some people saying that this is the best thing since the resurrection of Jesus, which, okay, what the fuck, I guess. But even when I do think it's a little bit overrated, I do still think it's a damn good movie. I just really don't like that ending. The ending to me has always been fucking stupid. Like, who's gonna demand to know who killed these 5 people? Like, fucking Joker killed 20 people before those dudes. Coming in at number 6 is going to be Memento. Memento has always been a movie that I really, really enjoyed. Now, I do think it loses its rewatchability due to like the confusion of which scene kind of goes where. But to me, that also kind of adds to my experience personally because I've always really enjoyed this movie because it's always been different. I've because this movie tells a story about a guy trying to find the person that raped and murdered his wife and also caused his, condition of where he loses his memory all the time. So this and a revenge story and revenge stories have always been some of my favorite stories in film. My favorite movie of all time is Kill Bill. That's a revenge tale. So revenge tales have always been my favorite stories and tales and in films in general. But revenge tales have always been a thing that have always been like my favorite thing in film. And what Christopher Nolan does to make this movie interesting and different from others, so it's not a repetitive story that we've already seen. There's something in my eye. Is that it does this thing of where it puts you into the character's shoes and makes you experience what he has experienced with his memory loss because he, maybe one day he figures it out who it is, but then, loses memory because he didn't write it down or something. And Christopher Nolan just does a brilliant job of making this movie interesting and making this movie watchable because, it's a different concept and a different type of story that you've never seen before. And the editing of how they put this film together to me has always been the highlight. Now, I like I said at the beginning when I was talking about the movie, is it does lose a little bit of rewatchability because of that confusion of like, oh, you don't know which scene goes where, or by the time the movie is over you kind of already figured it out and you've already experienced the journey to where you don't really want to experience it again necessarily. But for me, I've always really enjoyed experiencing this movie again and again and again, kind of like the character. But when I was watching the movie, like you kind of watch certain scenes where it's just like, oh, it plays the end of this scene, but then later on it shows you how it began. But at the same time, you're kind of confused of like, oh, which scene goes where? Like, when did this happen in the movie or whatever? The confusion part of it. But it's still a damn good movie. And now we have entered the top 5. And if I'm completely honest, by the next time I do this ranking of whenever Christopher Nolan's next film comes out, and when I redo this ranking, this top 5 might be switched around at that point because these top 5 for me are basically all masterpieces. These are all masterpieces in my mind, and these are all terrific films to where these are probably all in like my top 50 favorite movies of all time. I fucking love all of these movies. So by the next time I do this ranking, all of these movies will be changed. But coming in at number 5 is going to be The Prestige. This is probably, to me, this is Christopher Nolan's most underrated film because nobody talks about The Prestige. I've seen some people talk about Insomnia, and I said that was his most underrated movie, which kind of lied a little bit. But I've seen some people talk about Insomnia. I don't see anybody talk about The Prestige. And it is a fucking crime that no one does because this movie is a fucking masterpiece, and I absolutely love it. You think that a movie just be, showing you the secrets of magic and how obsession can take you over as a person. You think that would be a boring movie, but nope. When you have Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, Batman and Wolverine in a movie together in a Christopher Nolan film, you know that it's going to be good and it's fucking amazing. The themes of obsession and guilt, not guilt, but the theme of obsession of this film is just so perfectly shown throughout the entire movie. And just, and the theme of showing like I want to outdo the other person, like the basically the pissing contest between Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman's character, of where they're constantly wanting to outdo one another, and they're constantly wanting to come up with this gigantic magic trick that no one has ever seen before, no one has ever experienced, to where they want people to see something they've never seen before, and that is the whole movie. And then when Hugh Jackman comes up with the greatest magic trick, Christian Bale has to figure it out. And the ending of this movie, I won't say it here for those who have not seen this movie, but please go watch my review, and hell, just go watch the movie in general. But the ending of this movie is one of those endings where it's right in your fucking face the entire time and you just don't realize it. And it's and what I love about the twist ending of this movie, it's a lot like a magic trick. It's right in your face, and by the time you're shown, you feel like an idiot. The twist ending is a lot like a magic trick. Coming in at number 4 is going to be the new kid on the block, The Odyssey. Now, when I was going into this movie, I expected this movie to be fucking awesome. I expected this movie to be one of Christopher Nolan's, biggest movies, and hell, probably his biggest movie ever made. I heard nothing but praise about this movie before I went and watched it, and by the time the movie was over, I never audibly said no out loud when watching a film. By the time the credits started rolling, I said no, because I fucking loved this movie. This is probably Christopher Nolan's best made movie. If I were to make this list based off of, you know, that's like based off his like best made movies, this would be number one without a doubt in my mind. Not only is the writing phenomenal, the cinematography is fucking gorgeous, the set pieces are amazing, and I'm glad, and from what I can tell, everything was practical, and that was fucking awesome. And the performances by everybody was fucking amazing. Everyone tried to boycott this movie because of fucking dumb reasons. But they showed them. The performances throughout this entire movie are awesome. Tom Holland, he not only is Matt Damon a standout in this movie, Tom Holland gives one of the best performances I've ever seen out of him. This is probably his best performance I've ever seen out of him, actually. He does an amazing job. And Matt Damon, man, I owe that man for an apology for every time I made fun of him, because this man gave the performance of a lifetime. His performance as Odysseus, it might have been his best performance. And I swear to God, if he does not get nominated at the Oscars, we're going to have a fucking problem. And, before I move on, Christopher Nolan, and there's a lot of rumors going around him about he wants to make a horror film. Is that he says that he would love to make a horror film. He just wants to find the right story because he doesn't believe there's a lot of great horror movies out there, which, if you know me, I would beg to differ. But after watching this movie, after the Cyclops sequence and the whole big giant armored dude sequence and another sequence before they fall into the whirlpool or whatever, those three sequences and the witch scene with the pigs, I need to see this man make a horror movie, because this movie was genuinely horrifying. Like fucking that Cyclops sequence, I was so glad to find out that was practical. I thought it was CGI when I was watching it, but that was fucking practical, and it was fucking gorgeous. That whole sequence was fucking terrifying in my opinion, especially that witch scene with the body horror, which reminded me a lot of David Cronenberg's like The Fly and other body horror films. Seeing what he did with those sequences alone, I need to see him make a full-on horror movie. Because if he can make those different sequences and, moments of this movie terrifying, I need to see what he can do with a full-blown horror movie. And I hope that's his next film. But I will say this. I am not overly familiar with the story. I am not overly familiar with the source material. I have not read the book. I have not really known anything. And I didn't really pay attention much in history when we would talk about it. So this movie is kind of told basically as an anthology in a way, and Odyssey is kind of trying to regain his memory and kind of talking about his journey of trying to get home. I didn't really necessarily like it was told that way. Now, I don't know if that's what it's like in the book or the source material or the story in general, but I didn't really like that, but it was a very small issue that I had. And if that's the only issue I have with your movie, then you did a fucking amazing job. But this is going to win a lot of awards at the Oscars, I hope. And this is going to get nominated to shit. I guarantee it. This is going to get nominated in every category, I feel. But my god, man, The Odyssey. It's going to be a hell of a movie for Christopher Nolan to follow this one up with. And now we have entered top three, and I might get a little bit in trouble with my top three, but hey, fuck it. Opinions matter, right? But coming in at number three is going to be Inception. Inception to me is what I think kind of put Christopher Nolan out there as like, oh, this is what I can do with a big budget, and this is what I can do with an awesome concept. And he fucking shows that. Excuse me. Not only is the cast awesome as always, but you also have Leonardo DiCaprio in your movie, which these two need to make a movie together again because my God, we need to see Leo again. But the action in the action in this movie put fucking the Dark Knight trilogy to shame in my mind because how the fuck is the action in this heist movie better than a comic book film? Like the action in this movie just really puts those movies to shame in my mind. However, this is just an awesome movie. And like I was talking about with Memento, Christopher Nolan takes a very, generic subgenre and a generic story of a heist film, but he makes it interesting with the concept of Inception of deep sleep. And now I will admit maybe the explanation of what Inception is can get a little bit confusing, and I understand why some people might, feel confused about that. But to me, I understand what it kind of means, but sometimes I do get a little bit confused. But at the same time, it doesn't take away from my experience. But the concept of Inception, of deep sleep, of going into sleep and going into the dreamer's mind, of basically trying to get information out of him or like money or whatever, because these guys are thieves. That's what a heist is. Just Christopher Nolan, just an amazing job of making something that's so generic, so damn interesting, and so damn enjoyable. And it's kind of a shame that we didn't get to see Leo in another Nolan movie. And a lot of people are always kind of confused by the ending of like, oh, what does the ending mean? What's the ending mean? And I've always kind of sat around. I'm like, I think it's pretty fucking obvious what the ending is, but all right, people can always have theories. Okay, so I'm probably going to get in a lot of trouble for my number two, which, okay, I know we were supposed to have our own opinions and all that, and respect each other's opinions, but you can yell at me about this one, I guess, because coming in at my number two is The Dark Knight Rises.
You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Dark Knight Rises has always been my favorite Batman movie. This is my Batman movie. This and the Batman. They've always You ask me today, you ask me tomorrow, my opinion and my thoughts will probably change. But this has always been my Batman movie. And purely probably based off nostalgia. Now, if I probably were to watch this movie today, I probably would have a lot different feelings about this movie. But even with my nostalgia out of the way, because I can put nostalgia out of the way, and just watching this movie as is, this to me is the perfect conclusion to an amazing comic book trilogy and just an amazing Batman film. Because whenever I ever do decide to rewatch this movie, I am just enjoying it from beginning to end because not only does it cap off the League of Shadows stuff that we began this trilogy with, which basically kind of just got shoved to the side in the Dark Knight for Joker and Two Face, but we finally come back to it in the conclusion, and I that's one of the things that I really like. And when you have an amazing and generational performance like Heath Ledger's Joker, it's going to take a hell of a guy and a hell of a villain to follow that up with and try to, try and beat that pretty much. But Tom Hardy as Bane is an amazing fucking casting, and he's an amazing actor in this role. Tom Hardy's Bane has always been one of my favorite villains, and I also have a lot of nostalgia with him because I remember I wanted the toy of this fucker And my grandma, she bought me clothes, but the box was the size of the fucking toy that they were selling at Walmart at the time. I'll never forget that. God damn it, grandma. But I still love my grandma. But this is, to me, this is just the ultimate Batman movie. Now, I do admit that there are a lot of, gripes with this film, and there's like a lot of nitpicks with this film. So, like, you can nitpick this movie to fucking shame. Like, you can nitpick everything out of this movie, and I wouldn't blame you. Because the whole ending of this movie, not only is that the death scene of Talia al Ghul fucking stupid, and just her character is kind of boring in my mind, but the whole thing of how Gordon finds out that Batman's really Bruce Wayne is about he like, oh, put a coat over of a young boy's shoulders, make sure the world isn't dead or whatever. And he goes, Bruce Wayne. I'm like, motherfucker, that was 40 years ago. How the fuck do you remember that? Like, I can understand why people would nitpick this movie apart. But for me, I just love it. But coming in at my number one, my favorite Christopher Nolan movie is Oppenheimer. When I first watched this movie, I knew I liked it, but I didn't necessarily know I was in love with it. Like, I loved this movie when it came out, but I didn't know if I was in love with it necessarily. But when I rewatched it for this review series, and the entire time I was just watching it, my eyes were just glued to the screen, and I was just full focus on the movie and just everything going on. I just fucking loved. Like, this was a movie I was really excited for when it came out, and when it came out and I watched it, I loved it. And I think when I first did this ranking, it was my number three. I can't remember though. And to see that it came up to my number one, I was genuinely shocked by. Because when I was making my list and I was going down, all the Christopher Nolan movies and making my list, and I put this one at number one. I was like, holy shit, I really love this movie. And, just sitting here thinking about it, I love it because it's hard to talk about this movie because it just leaves you speechless. Not only are the performances all around fucking awesome, the cast in general is awesome. You got Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., all of these fucking guys in this movie. But how Christopher Nolan just makes this movie so interesting with this movie just being purely dialogue. That's all it is. There's no action until the test sequence and or whatever, like the whole test sequence. But he just makes this movie so fucking good. And not only does he make it good and interesting, but he makes you realize how scary the world is. Like you will never feel safe after watching this movie again. I remember I felt that way after watching it. But Oppenheimer, man, it's just an amazing film. And even thinking about it right now, I'm like, that's a damn good fucking movie. But, you know, The Odyssey is probably his best made movie, but to me, it's going to take a hell of a movie to top this one. Thank you all so much for watching my ranking of all 13 Christopher Nolan review series as of 2026, because I will be redoing this whenever he does release his new film. Let me know your guys' ranking down in the comments below. What is your favorite Christopher Nolan movie? Let me know in the comments below, and we shall talk about it. And if you like this video, like it. If you love it, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you will get notified for all of my latest videos. And I will be leaving a playlist for all of my Christopher Nolan reviews at the very end of the video so you can catch up on that. But, of course, until my next video, I'll see you all next time.